the first time Helena Sullivan laid eyes on the wedding invoice. She thought surely there had been some mistake, but her fiancé, Randall Montgomery's mother, simply patted her hand and said it was all quite normal for a family of their standing in Fort Davis, Texas, in the year 1883. Helena had come to Fort Davis 6 months earlier from Kansas City, fleeing a life that had crumbled when her father's shipping business went bankrupt, and her mother passed from consumption within the same terrible winter. She had answered an advertisement for a seamstress position at the general store, and within 2 weeks of her arrival, Randall Montgomery had walked through the door looking for new shirts. He was handsome in a polished way, with slicked-back dark hair and expensive boots, the son of the wealthiest cattle baron in Jeff Davis County. His courtship had been whirlwind and overwhelming, and Helena, grief-stricken and alone in a strange town, had said yes when he proposed after only 3 months. Now she sat in the parlor of the Montgomery mansion on the outskirts of town, staring at a piece of paper that detailed every conceivable wedding expense, and her hands trembled as she calculated the total. $3,000. The dress alone was listed at $400, the flowers at $300, the reception dinner at $800. Her entire savings from 6 months of work amounted to $73. "I don't understand," Helena said quietly, looking up at Margaret Montgomery, whose smile never quite reached her cold blue eyes. "I thought the groom's family traditionally paid for the wedding." "In some circles, perhaps," Margaret said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But the Montgomery family has a reputation to uphold. We cannot have people thinking we would stoop to paying for our son to marry a penniless shop girl. It would reflect poorly on Randall's judgment. Naturally, the bride's family covers the expenses to show they are worthy of the match." "But I have no family," Helena whispered, feeling tears sting her eyes. "You know this." "Then I suppose you will need to find the money yourself, dear. The wedding is in 6 weeks. Surely you can manage something. Perhaps you have items you could sell, jewelry from your mother." Helena's mother had sold every piece of jewelry they owned to pay for medicine during her final months. There was nothing left but a simple silver locket Helena wore around her neck, the only thing she had to remember her mother by. "I will speak to Randall about this," Helena said, trying to keep her voice steady. Margaret's expression hardened. "Randall agrees with me completely. This is the way things are done in respectable society. If you cannot afford to marry into this family properly, perhaps you should reconsider whether you belong here at all." Helena left the Montgomery house feeling as though the desert sun had grown impossibly hotter, pressing down on her with suffocating weight. She walked back toward town, her mind racing through impossible calculations. Even if she worked every hour of every day for the next 6 weeks, she could not earn enough. She could not borrow such a sum. She had no collateral, no family, no options. The Fort Davis General Store where she worked sat on the main street, wedged between the saloon and the telegraph office. As Helena approached, she saw a tall figure leaning against the hitching post outside, a gray horse drinking from the trough. The man wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat pulled low against the sun. When he looked up at her approach, Helena felt something shift in her chest at the sight of his face. He was probably around 25, maybe a year or two older than her own 22 years, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of amber whiskey. There was dust on his clothes and stubble on his jaw, and he looked nothing like the polished men she had met in Fort Davis society. He looked real in a way that made everything else feel like theater. "Afternoon, miss," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was low and rough, like gravel and honey mixed together. Helena nodded, trying to compose herself before going inside. She must have failed because the cowboy straightened from his casual lean and took a step toward her. "Are you all right?" he asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice that made the tears she had been holding back suddenly threaten to spill over. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Thank you for your concern." She hurried inside before he could say anything else, before the kindness in a stranger's eyes could break down the walls she was desperately trying to maintain. Mr. Peterson, the store owner, looked up from behind the counter. "Mrs. Montgomery was just here," he said, and Helena's stomach dropped. "She said you would be needing to work extra hours to save money for your wedding. I told her that was fine, but Helena, I cannot pay you more than your current wage. I hope you understand." Of course, Margaret had already been here, already been spreading the word, making sure Helena had no room to maneuver or negotiate. Helena nodded numbly and moved behind the counter to begin her shift, organizing bolts of fabric and helping customers select buttons and thread. The work was mechanical, and her mind churned uselessly through her impossible situation. The cowboy came in an hour later, and Helena was surprised to feel her heart skip when the door opened and he walked through. He removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that curled slightly at the ends, and approached the counter with an easy stride. "I need some supplies," he said. "Coffee, beans, flour, jerky if you have it, and some tobacco." Helena gathered the items, very aware of his eyes on her as she moved through the store. When she tallied his purchase, he paid without haggling and then stood there for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. "My name is Harrison Sawyer," he said. "I work at the Davis Mountain Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I am going to be in town for a few days while the boss negotiates a cattle sale." "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Sawyer," Helena said politely, not sure why he was telling her this. "I noticed you seemed upset earlier," he continued. "I know it is not my business, but if you need help with something, I would be glad to offer assistance." Helena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but honest concern in his expression. No ulterior motive, no judgment, just a good man offering help to someone in distress. It made something ache in her chest. "That's very kind," she said softly, "but I'm afraid my problems are beyond anyone's ability to help." Harrison nodded slowly, then picked up his supplies. "If you change your mind, I will be staying at the boarding house on 2nd Street for the next 3 days. My offer stands." After he left, Helena found herself thinking about him at odd moments throughout the day. There had been something steady about him, something solid that made her feel momentarily anchored in a world that had become increasingly unstable. That evening, Randall came to walk her home from the store, something he did perhaps once a week when it suited him. He kissed her cheek in greeting, and Helena tried not to notice how the gesture felt perfunctory, empty of real affection. "Mother tells me you were concerned about the wedding expenses," he said as they walked. "Helena, you must understand how important this is. The Montgomery name means everything in this county. We cannot have a shabby wedding. People would talk." $3,000, Randall," Helena said, stopping on the boardwalk to face him. "I make $20 a month. Even if I did not eat or pay rent, I could never save that much in 6 weeks. It is impossible." Randall's handsome face tightened with irritation. "Then you will need to find another way. Borrow it. Sell something. I don't know, Helena, but that is your responsibility. My family has already contributed by allowing you to marry into it despite your circumstances." The words hit Helena like a physical blow. Allowing her. As if she should be grateful to be squeezed for every penny she did not have, grateful to be marrying a man who could speak to her with such callous disregard. "What if I cannot get the money?" she asked quietly. Randall looked at her with cold eyes. "Then there will be no wedding, and you will need to find somewhere else to live. The room you rent is owned by my cousin, and I doubt he will want to continue housing you if you embarrass our family." He left her standing on the boardwalk, and Helena made her way to her small rented room feeling as though she were drowning. She lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, understanding with brutal clarity that she had made a terrible mistake. She had been so desperate for security, for a place to belong after losing everything, that she had agreed to marry a man she did not love, and who certainly did not love her. She was nothing but a possession to him, a pretty thing to display, and now even that was conditional on her ability to pay for the privilege. The next morning, Helena woke with a decision crystallizing in her mind. She could not marry Randall Montgomery. Even if she somehow found the money, even if the wedding happened, she would be binding herself to a man and a family who saw her as beneath them, someone to be used and controlled. Better to be alone and poor than trapped in a gilded cage. But breaking the engagement meant losing her job and her housing, and she had nowhere to go. She would need to leave Fort Davis, start over somewhere else, and that required money she did not have. Helena was so lost in these thoughts as she walked to work that she nearly collided with Harrison Sawyer outside the general store. He caught her elbow to steady her, and the warmth of his hand through her sleeve made her breath catch. "Careful," he said with a slight smile. "The morning is too pretty to spend it falling in the street." "I apologize," Helena said, flustered. "I was not paying attention." Harrison released her arm but did not step back. "You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, Miss Sullivan." She was surprised he knew her name, then remembered that Fort Davis was a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. "I suppose I do," she admitted. "I am heading to breakfast at the cafe," Harrison said. "Would you join me? You look like you could use a good meal and maybe someone to talk to." Helena knew she should say no. She was engaged, even if she planned to break it off, and having breakfast with a strange cowboy would cause gossip. But Harrison's eyes were kind, and she was so tired of feeling alone. "All right," she said, "but I have to be at work in an hour." The cafe was busy with morning customers, ranch hands and miners grabbing food before starting their days. Harrison found them a table near the window and ordered coffee and eggs and biscuits for both of them. When the food arrived, Helena realized she was hungrier than she had thought, having barely eaten the day before. "So," Harrison said after they had eaten in companionable silence for a few minutes, "what is it that has you so troubled?" Helena looked at him, at this stranger who had shown her more genuine kindness in 2 days than her fiancé had in 6 months, and found herself telling him everything. The engagement, the impossible wedding expenses, Margaret Montgomery's cruelty, Randall's callousness, her complete lack of options. The words poured out of her, and Harrison listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke. When she finished, Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight with anger. Finally, he set down his coffee cup and looked at her directly. "This is not right," he said, and there was steel in his voice. "What they are doing to you is not right. No decent man would treat a woman this way, would demand she pay for the privilege of marrying him. And no decent family would squeeze someone for every penny when they clearly have no means to pay." Helena felt tears well up at the validation, at hearing someone acknowledge the injustice of her situation. "I know," she whispered, "but knowing it is wrong does not give me any options." Harrison leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You have options. You can walk away today, right now." "And go where?" Helena asked. "Do what? I have no family, no money beyond a few dollars. If I break the engagement, I will lose my job and my room. I will be homeless in a strange town with no prospects. You can come work at the Davis Mountain Ranch," Harrison said immediately. "The boss's wife has been looking for help with the house and the cooking. The pay is not much, but it comes with room and board, and they are good people. Fair people. I can take you there today." Helena stared at him, hardly daring to believe what he was offering. "You barely know me. Why would you help me like this?" Harrison's expression softened. "Because it is the right thing to do. And because I have seen enough cruelty in this world to recognize kindness when I see it. You deserve better than what they are giving you, Miss Sullivan." Helena felt something crack open inside her chest, some frozen place that had been locked tight since her mother died. Here was a man who owed her nothing, offering her a way out of an impossible situation simply because it was right. She thought of Randall's cold eyes and Margaret's cruel smile, and she thought of Harrison's steady gaze and genuine concern. "All right," she said, her voice shaking. "All right, yes. I will go with you." Harrison's face broke into a smile that transformed him, making him almost unbearably handsome. "Good. That is real good. We should go now before anyone can stop you. Do you have belongings you need to collect?" "Just a few things in my room," Helena said. "Clothes, my mother's locket. It will not take long." They left the cafe together, and Helena was aware of curious stares following them. Let them look, she thought with a reckless surge of freedom. Let them gossip. She was done living her life according to other people's expectations. Her room was a simple affair above the apothecary, with a narrow bed and a small dresser. Helena packed her few possessions into a carpet bag while Harrison waited outside, and within 15 minutes she was ready. As they walked back toward the general store where Harrison's horse was hitched, Helena stopped. "I should tell Mr. Peterson I am leaving," she said. "He has been kind to me. And if he tells the Montgomerys before we can get out of town?" Harrison asked gently. Helena thought about it and realized Harrison was right. Margaret Montgomery would find some way to stop her, would threaten or manipulate or lie to keep Helena trapped. "I will write him a letter and leave it at the boarding house to be delivered this afternoon," she said. They went to the boarding house, where Harrison paid his bill and collected his own few belongings. Helena wrote a brief note to Mr. Peterson thanking him for the work and apologizing for leaving without notice. She did not write anything to Randall or his mother. They deserved no explanation, no courtesy. Harrison lifted her onto his gray horse, then swung up behind her. The intimacy of the position, feeling his solid presence at her back and his arms reaching around her to hold the reins, made Helena's pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. They rode north out of Fort Davis at a steady pace, the morning sun climbing higher in the pale blue sky. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all rocky peaks and scrub brush and endless sky. Helena had been too consumed with survival to appreciate it before, but now, breathing in the clean air and feeling the horse's muscles moving beneath her, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. "Tell me about the Davis Mountain Ranch," she said after they had been riding for a while. "It belongs to Samuel and Martha Fletcher," Harrison said, his voice rumbling pleasantly near her ear. "They have about 2,000 head of cattle and 20 hands working the spread. I have been there for 3 years, and they treat their people right. Pay fair wages, never ask more than they give. Mrs. Fletcher is getting on in years and has trouble managing the house by herself. She has been talking about needing help for months." "And you think they will really take me in just on your word?" Helena asked. "I know they will," Harrison said with quiet confidence. "Samuel trusts my judgment and Martha has a good heart. When they hear what you have been through, they will be glad to help." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Helena found herself relaxing against Harrison's chest, feeling safer than she had in months. It was strange how quickly she had come to trust him, this man she had known for less than 2 days, but there was something fundamentally decent about Harrison Sawyer. She could feel it in the gentle way he handled the horse, in the respectful way he spoke to her, in his immediate anger at the injustice of her situation. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Anything. Why are you not married? You seem like a good man." Surely women in Fort Davis have noticed. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "I have been too focused on work to think much about courting," he said finally. "I have been saving money, hoping to buy my own land someday, start my own ranch." It did not seem fair to ask a woman to share that dream when I had nothing to offer but hard work and uncertain prospects. "That sounds lonely," Helena said softly. "It has been," Harrison admitted, "but I figured it was better to be alone than to settle for something that was not right. I have seen too many marriages built on convenience or desperation. I have always hoped to find something real." Helena felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I think that is wise," she said. "I wish I had been so wise myself. I was desperate and alone, and I let that cloud my judgment. I agreed to marry a man I did not love because I thought security mattered more than happiness." "You cannot blame yourself for that," Harrison said firmly. "You were in an impossible situation. You made the best choice you could with the information you had. And now you are making a different choice, a braver one." They reached the Davis Mountain Ranch just before noon. The main house was a sprawling adobe structure with a wide porch and a garden that somehow thrived despite the harsh climate. Outbuildings dotted the property, and Helena could see cattle grazing in the distance and horses in the corral. A man emerged from the barn as they rode up, tall and weathered with gray in his beard. His face broke into a smile when he saw Harrison. "Sawyer, you are back early," he called. "I did not expect you until tomorrow." Harrison dismounted and helped Helena down, his hands strong and steady on her waist. "Mr. Fletcher, this is Miss Helena Sullivan. She needs help, and I am hoping you and Mrs. Fletcher can provide it." Samuel Fletcher's eyes moved to Helena, taking in her rumpled traveling clothes and nervous expression. His face grew serious. "Come inside," he said. "Let us hear this story." In the cool dimness of the ranch house kitchen, with Martha Fletcher's kind eyes watching her over a cup of coffee, Helena told her story again. Martha was a sturdy woman in her 50s with silver-streaked brown hair and the capable hands of someone who had worked hard her whole life. She listened to Helena's tale with growing indignation, and when Helena finished, Martha reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Those Montgomery people are poison," Martha said bluntly. "Always have been, always thought themselves better than everyone else. You are well rid of them, child. And Harrison was right to bring you here. We can use the help and you will be safe with us." Helena felt tears spill over, relief and gratitude overwhelming her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." "None of that now," Martha said briskly, though her eyes were soft. "We take care of our own here, and anyone Harrison vouches for is our own. Now, let me show you to your room, and then we can discuss your duties." The room Martha showed her to was small but clean, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the mountains. It was in the main house, down the hall from the Fletcher's room, and Helena felt her chest loosen at the realization that she would be safe here, truly safe. Over the next few days, Helena settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped Martha with the cooking and cleaning, mended clothes for the ranch hands, and tended the garden. The work was harder than it had been at the general store, but it felt honest and worthwhile. The Fletchers treated her with warmth and respect, and the other ranch hands were polite and friendly. And then there was Harrison. Helena saw him every day, at mealtimes in the bunkhouse or working around the ranch. He always made time to check on her, to ask how she was settling in. And Helena found herself looking forward to those moments with an anticipation that went beyond gratitude. A week after her arrival, a rider came from Fort Davis with a letter addressed to Helena. She opened it with shaking hands, fearing it would be from Randall or his mother, but it was from Mr. Peterson. He wrote that Randall Montgomery had been furious when he learned Helena had left, and Margaret Montgomery had spread vicious rumors about Helena stealing from the store. Mr. Peterson assured her he had defended her character and told everyone who would listen that she had been treated shamefully. He wished her well and hoped she had found somewhere better. Helena showed the letter to Harrison that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He read it with a grim expression, then handed it back to her. "Let them talk," he said. "Anyone with sense will see through their lies, and you are here now where they cannot touch you." "I keep expecting to feel guilty," Helena admitted, "for breaking the engagement, for leaving without explanation. But I do not. I just feel relieved." Harrison turned to look at her, the fading light turning his eyes to gold. "That tells you everything you need to know about whether you made the right choice." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. Helena was intensely aware of Harrison beside her, the warmth radiating from his body, the steady sound of his breathing. "Helena," he said quietly, and something in his voice made her turn to face him. "I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not make things difficult between us." "What is it?" she asked, her heart beginning to pound. "I cannot stop thinking about you," Harrison said, his eyes locked on hers. "From the first moment I saw you outside the general store, I have not been able to get you out of my mind. I know the timing is wrong. I know you just escaped an engagement and probably need time to recover, but I cannot be around you every day and pretend I do not feel what I feel." Helena's breath caught in her throat. "And what do you feel?" "I feel like I would do anything to keep you safe," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. "I feel like every time you smile, the whole world gets brighter. I feel like I have been waiting my whole life without knowing what I was waiting for, and then you walked into that general store, and suddenly everything made sense." Helena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, warm tears. "Harrison, I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you said what the Montgomerys were doing was not right. No one has stood up for me like that in so long. No one has made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth fighting for." Harrison reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "You matter, Helena. You are worth everything." When he kissed her, it felt nothing like the cold, perfunctory kisses Randall had given her. This kiss was warm and deep and full of promise, and Helena felt something inside her that had been frozen for months suddenly burst into flame. She kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside, all the fear and hope and desperate longing for something real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have much to offer," he said. "I am just a cowboy with some savings and a dream of owning land someday. But I promise you, Helena, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will never make you feel less than you are. I will never squeeze you for anything except affection, and that I will give freely in return." Helena laughed, a sound of pure joy. "You have more to offer than any rich man I have ever met. You have a good heart, Harrison Sawyer, and that is worth more than all the money in Texas." They spent the evening on that porch, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams. Harrison told her about growing up in New Mexico, losing his parents to influenza when he was 16, working various ranches until he landed at the Davis Mountain Spread. Helena told him about her childhood in Kansas City, her father's kindness and her mother's strength, the devastation of losing them both. "We have both known loss," Harrison said, holding her hand in the darkness. "But maybe that means we will appreciate what we have found even more." The days turned into weeks, and Helena and Harrison's relationship deepened. They were careful to be respectful under the Fletchers' roof, but everyone on the ranch could see what was growing between them. Martha Fletcher watched them with approving eyes and told Helena she had never seen Harrison so happy. 2 months after Helena arrived at the ranch, Harrison asked Samuel Fletcher for permission to marry her. Samuel gave his blessing enthusiastically, and that evening Harrison took Helena back to the porch where they had shared their first kiss. "I know we have not known each other long," he said, holding both her hands, "but I know my heart, and I know you are the woman I want to spend my life with. Helena Sullivan, will you marry me? Will you share my dreams and let me share yours? Will you build a life with me, whatever that life may look like?" Helena felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." The wedding took place a month later in Fort Davis, at the small church on the edge of town. It was nothing like the elaborate affair Margaret Montgomery had planned. There were no expensive flowers or fancy reception. Martha Fletcher made Helena a simple but beautiful dress of ivory cotton, and Harrison wore his best shirt and a new pair of boots he had saved up for. The Fletchers were there, along with most of the ranch hands and a handful of townspeople who had been kind to Helena during her time working at the general store. Mr. Peterson came and gave Helena a silver picture frame as a wedding gift. "I am glad you found happiness," he told her warmly. "You deserve it after what you went through." The Montgomerys, predictably, did not attend, but Helena heard through town gossip that Randall had become engaged to the daughter of another wealthy rancher within a month of her departure. She felt nothing but relief at the news. Let him marry someone from his own social circle, someone who could afford to be squeezed for every penny. The wedding ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When Harrison said his vows, promising to love and cherish Helena through all the trials life might bring, his voice was steady and sure. When Helena promised the same, she felt the weight of those words settle around her heart like a blessing. They held the reception at the ranch, with Martha's excellent cooking and a fiddler from town providing music. Helena danced with Harrison under the stars, feeling freer and happier than she had ever thought possible. This was what love should feel like, she thought. Not obligation or desperation, but joy and partnership and genuine affection. Harrison had saved enough money to buy a small plot of land about 5 miles from the Davis Mountain Ranch. 100 acres with a creek running through it, and good grass for cattle. Samuel Fletcher helped him negotiate the purchase, and even sold him 20 head of cattle at a fair price to get him started. Harrison and Helena spent their first months of marriage living in a small cabin on the property that Harrison built with help from the other ranch hands. The cabin was crude, just 2 rooms with a stone fireplace and a roof that sometimes leaked when it rained, but Helena had never been happier. She and Harrison worked side by side every day, building their ranch from nothing. They raised chickens and a few pigs, planted a vegetable garden, and slowly expanded their cattle herd. The work was brutally hard, especially in the summer heat, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. At night, exhausted and sore, they would lie in their narrow bed and talk about their dreams for the future. Harrison wanted to expand to 500 head eventually, maybe hire a few hands to help manage the work. Helena wanted to start breeding horses, something she had always been interested in but never had the opportunity to pursue. They made plans and adjusted them, supported each other through setbacks, and celebrated small victories. A year after their wedding, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison one evening after supper, and the look of wonder and joy on his face made her fall in love with him all over again. "We are going to have a baby," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Helena, we are going to be parents." Their son was born the following spring, a healthy baby with Harrison's dark hair and Helena's green eyes. They named him Thomas, after Helena's father, and Harrison proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband. Helena would often find him holding Thomas in the rocking chair he had built, talking to the baby about the ranch and the cattle and all the things they would do together when Thomas was old enough. The years passed in a blur of hard work and deep contentment. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. They built a proper house to replace the cabin, nothing fancy but solid and comfortable with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen. Helena started her horse breeding program, and it turned out she had a gift for it. Within a few years, people were coming from all over Jeff Davis County to buy her horses. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Rose when Thomas was 3, and another son named Daniel 2 years after that. The house was always full of noise and laughter, muddy boots and scraped knees, and the controlled chaos of raising children on a working ranch. Harrison taught Thomas to ride when he was 4. The same year Helena taught him his letters. Rose proved to be fearless, climbing everything in sight and insisting on helping her father with the cattle, even when she was too small to be much use. Daniel was quiet and thoughtful, preferring to help Helena with the horses and spending hours watching the animals with fascinated attention. They stayed close with the Fletchers, visiting often and helping out when Samuel's health began to fail. When Samuel died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, Harrison and Helena were there with Martha, offering comfort and support. Martha lived another 5 years, long enough to see Thomas start working as a ranch hand and to hold Helena's 4th child, a daughter they named Martha in her honor. Through it all, through the hard times and the good times, through droughts that threatened their livelihood and winters that tested their endurance, Helena and Harrison's love never wavered. They fought sometimes, as all couples do, but they always worked through it with honesty and respect. They never went to bed angry. They never took each other for granted. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Helena back to Fort Davis for dinner at the cafe where they had shared breakfast on the morning she decided to leave with him. The cafe had changed ownership, but the building was the same. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked over coffee. Leaving everything behind that day and trusting a stranger, Helena reached across the table and took his hand. "Not for a single second. You saved me, Harrison. Not just from the Montgomerys, but from a life where I would have been miserable and trapped. You showed me what real love looks like, what a real partnership should be." "You saved me too," Harrison said softly. "I was so focused on work and saving money that I had forgotten what I was working for. You reminded me that the point of building something is to share it with someone who matters. You gave me a family and a home, not just a ranch." They sat in that cafe holding hands and remembering the frightened young woman and the kind cowboy who had seen injustice and said it was not right, and they marveled at how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. 20 years after their wedding, Helena stood on the porch of their house watching Harrison teach their grandson to rope a fence post. Thomas had married a schoolteacher from Fort Davis, and they had given Helena and Harrison 3 grandchildren so far. Rose had surprised everyone by becoming a doctor, one of the first female physicians in West Texas, and she practiced in El Paso but visited often. Daniel ran the horse breeding operation now, having expanded it far beyond what Helena had started, and he had just gotten engaged to a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county. Their youngest, Martha, was 16 and showed every sign of being as headstrong and independent as her namesake. She talked about going to college, about seeing the world beyond Fort Davis, and Helena encouraged her even as her heart ached at the thought of her baby leaving. But that was life, Helena thought. Children grew and left and made their own paths. It was the way of things, and she was grateful to have given her children a foundation of love and security to launch from, something she herself had lacked until Harrison came into her life. Harrison looked up from the roping lesson and caught her eye, and even after 20 years, the smile he gave her made her heart skip. He had gray in his hair now, and lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, and she thought he was more handsome than ever. That night, after the grandchildren had been taken home and the house was quiet, Helena and Harrison sat on their porch watching the stars. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "You remember that first night we sat here?" Helena asked. "When you told me you could not stop thinking about me." Harrison pulled her closer, his arm warm around her shoulders. "I remember every moment of falling in love with you, and I am still falling, even now. Every day I find new reasons to love you." Helena tilted her face up to kiss him, a kiss that held 20 years of partnership and passion and unwavering devotion. "I love you, Harrison Sawyer. Thank you for saying it was not right. Thank you for giving me a way out. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for trusting me," Harrison said. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with nothing but good intentions and a dream. You made all my dreams come true, Helena. Every single one." They sat together under the vast Texas sky. Two people who had found each other when they both needed saving, who had built something real and lasting from nothing but hard work and genuine love. The ranch stretched out around them, the land they had worked and the home they had made, and in the distance they could hear cattle lowing and horses moving in the corral. It was not the life of wealth and society that Margaret Montgomery had promised, but it was infinitely better. It was real and honest and filled with love, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine partnership. Helena had been squeezed for every penny before that doomed wedding to Randall Montgomery, but Harrison Sawyer had looked at that injustice and said it was not right, and in doing so, he had given her something worth far more than money. He had given her a home, a family, a purpose, and a love that would last all their days. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night breeze carried the scent of sage and horses, Helena rested her head on Harrison's shoulder and felt complete. This was happiness, she thought. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, all those lonely months in Fort Davis. Not wealth or status or security, but this. A good man's love, a life built together through hard work and dedication, children and grandchildren to carry on what they had started. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Their cattle operation expanded to over 600 head, a number Harrison had once thought impossible. The horse breeding program Daniel ran brought in steady income and a reputation that spread across Texas and into New Mexico. People came from hundreds of miles away to buy horses from the Sawyer Ranch, knowing they were getting quality animals bred and trained with skill and care. Helena's hair turned silver, and Harrison's shoulders grew stooped from decades of hard labor, but their love never aged. They still held hands while walking to the barn each morning. They still made each other laugh over breakfast. They still sat on their porch every evening, talking about the day and making plans for tomorrow. Thomas took over most of the cattle operation as Harrison slowed down, and he proved to be as capable and fair-minded as his father. Rose visited twice a year, bringing stories of her medical practice and the lives she saved. Daniel married his fiancée in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch, and they built a house on the far end of the property to raise their own family. Martha went to college in Austin, studying literature and writing, and though she lived far away, she wrote long letters every week that Helena treasured. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration at the ranch. Over 100 people came, neighbors and friends and business associates from across the county. There was food and music and dancing, and at sunset, Thomas stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "They started with nothing but each other and built something that will last for generations. They taught us that hard work and integrity matter, that family is everything, and that real love is not about grand gestures, but about showing up every single day and choosing each other over and over again. Happy anniversary, Ma and Pa. We love you." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Helena felt tears streaming down her face as Harrison held her close. She looked around at all the faces, at the family and community they had built, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the day a kind cowboy had looked at her distress and decided to help. More years passed, and inevitably, the day came when Harrison's health began to fail. He was 73 years old and had lived a long, full life, but Helena was not ready to let him go. She sat by his bedside in their room, holding his hand and telling him stories of their life together. "Do you remember the first time you kissed me?" she asked, her voice shaking. "On the porch under the stars. You told me I was worth everything." Harrison's eyes opened, still that same amber color though dimmed now with age and illness. "You are worth everything," he said, his voice weak but certain. "Loving you has been the greatest honor of my life, Helena. Building this life with you, raising our children, growing old together. I would not change a single moment." "I am not ready," Helena whispered. "I am not ready to lose you." "You will never lose me," Harrison said, squeezing her hand with what little strength he had left. "I will be with you always, in every sunrise over the mountains, in every horse running free, in our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We built something that will last forever, you and I." Harrison Sawyer died peacefully 2 days later, surrounded by his family, his hand held in Helena's. At his funeral, people came from all over Texas to pay their respects, sharing stories of his kindness and integrity, his hard work and his devotion to his family. Helena grieved deeply, but she did not grieve alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love and support. The ranch continued to operate, a living testament to what she and Harrison had built together. She still sat on the porch every evening, though now she sat alone, talking to Harrison as if he were still beside her, telling him about her day and the doings of their family. She lived another 12 years after Harrison's death, long enough to see her great-grandchildren starting to work the ranch, long enough to see the Sawyer name become synonymous with quality and integrity throughout West Texas. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, still offering advice on horse breeding and ranch management, still telling stories of the early days to anyone who would listen. On a warm spring evening, just after her 87th birthday, Helena sat on her porch watching the sunset and felt a deep, bone-weary tiredness settle over her. She looked out over the land she and Harrison had built their life on, at the house they had raised their family in, at the mountains that had witnessed their love story from beginning to end. "I am ready now," she said softly to the empty air. "I am ready to see you again, my love." Helena Sullivan Sawyer died peacefully in her sleep that night, and when her children came to wake her the next morning, they found her with a smile on her face, as if she were seeing something beautiful. They buried her next to Harrison on a hill overlooking their ranch, under the endless Texas sky they had both loved. The ranch continued for generations after them, passed down through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The story of Helena and Harrison became family legend, the tale of how a kind cowboy had rescued a woman being squeezed for every penny before her wedding, how he had looked at injustice and said it was not right, and how that single act of decency had grown into a legacy of love that would endure forever. And on warm spring evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Davis Mountains, people swore they could see two figures sitting on the old porch of the original ranch house, holding hands and watching the sunset together, as they had for over 30 years of life and would for all eternity beyond it.